All right, class, welcome to your lesson for today. Miss Jones here. And what I wanted to do is go over with you, and this is really a review of writing equations that are in standard form to equations that are in slope-intercept form. So the first thing that you need to know is that if you have an equation, and remember, an equation is a math problem that has an equal sign. So if you have an equation that has an x and a y in it, then you can graph that on a graph with an x-axis and y-axis. So if you have an equation that has an x and y in it, you can graph that equation on a graph with an x and a y-axis. Okay, so I want to practice identifying equations that are in standard form and equations that are in slope-intercept form. So basically it's pretty simple. If you have a problem that has your x and y on the left side of the equal sign, then that is standard form. So notice how my x and the y are on the left of my equal sign. My x and my y are on the left of my equal sign. And again, same here, the x and the y are to the left of the equal sign. So we could graph each of those equations, but it would take some work to do that. So these are called standard form. And that is when your x and your y are on the left side of your equal sign. Now let's take a look at slope-intercept form. Now we spent a lot of time in class going over this, and what slope-intercept form is an equation that has an x and a y, and we write slope-intercept form in the version of y equals mx plus b. And so the important thing to remember is that for slope-intercept form, your y is always on the left side of the equal sign by itself. So my y is on the left side by itself. My y is on the left side by itself. My y is on the left side by itself. So again, for standard form, your x and your y are on the left side of the equal sign. And for slope-intercept form, your y is on the left by itself. Now, you don't need to write all this down, but what we are going to do is we're going to work out some examples together. And we're going to practice from going from standard form to slope-intercept form, meaning that we're going to start with an equation where our x and our y are on the left. And we want to move everything around so that we have slope-intercept, or y is by itself on the left-hand side of equal sign. So please write down example 1. The first thing we're going to do is draw a river through the equal sign, and I'm going to circle my variable y with the number and sign in front of it. So I'm going to circle negative 5y. What I've circled is what I'll do last. Now I need to move this 12x to the opposite side, so opposite of positive is negative, or subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 12x from each side. Now my line that I drew all the way across symbolizes my equal sign. 12x minus 12x equals 0, so I can cross that out. And I have my negative 5y equals, now I've got a negative 30 and a negative 12x, and I want to write that from left to right instead of having those two lined up with one on top of the other. So I'm going to write down my x part first, so negative 12x. That's a negative 30, so that's the same as a minus 30. Now, my last step is to get the y by itself. So this is negative 5 times y. So to undo that multiplication, opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide everything. Okay, sorry about that. My husband came down to get his food from the oven, and he was kind of loud, so I stopped the video, and I forgot what I said last. So We're just going to pick up where we left off. So what I said was that we were going to divide everything by -5. And then I'm going to simplify if I can. So -5 divided by itself is just going to cancel. So I'm left with my y equals. Remember, my negatives, when I divide negatives, they cancel out. So I have 12 over 5x, which is my slope. So I leave that as an improper fraction. Now, 30 divided by 5 is 6. And you can use a calculator to check that. So I would get 6. And a negative divided by negative is positive. So -30 divided by -5 is positive 6, which I would write as plus 6. So my answer in slope-intercept form is y equals 12 over 5x plus 6. And this is slope-intercept because I have the y by itself on the left side of the equal sign. I have my x, and then I have my just regular number. Okay, let's try a couple more to make sure we have the hang of this, because it's been a little bit. So number 2, please write down this problem as well. I've got -13x minus 18y equals -2. Now, if I'm going too fast for you to write and be able to pay attention, just pause the video and then catch up when you're ready. So again, my first step is going to be to draw my river down the equal sign. This is called standard form because I have x and y on the left of the equal sign. But to have slope-intercept form, which is what I want, I need to get that y by itself. So my first thing I'm going to do is circle the -18y, because that's what I do last. Make sure that you circle that minus, which is a -2. Now to move that -13x to the opposite side, to get one step closer to getting the y by itself, opposite of negative is positive, so I'm going to add 13x to each side. Remember that this horizontal line drawn across, that represents your equal sign. So -13x plus 13x is 0, and then I'm going to rewrite the problem. -18 times y equals, I write my x part first, so my positive 13x, and then I write my regular number, which is a -2. Okay, my last step is to divide everything by the number in front of y, which is -18. So I'm going to divide everything by -18 to get the y by itself. -18 divided by itself is 1, and I'm left with y equals. Now, notice how this negative is on the bottom of my fraction, but because I have just one negative, that goes with the whole fraction. So I'm going to write that as -13 over 18x. Now again, be careful with your negatives. Here I have a negative on top. Whoops. Here I have a negative on top and a negative on the bottom. So those will cancel out and make a positive. So it's going to be plus a number. And I've got 2 over 18. Now I can simplify 2 over 18 because my 2 and 18 are even numbers. So I'm going to simplify that fraction by dividing it by 2 over 2. So I know that 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 18 divided by 2 is 9. So when I can simplify my fractions, I do. So my answer is y equals -13 over 18x plus 1 over 9. And once I have that y on the left side by itself, I'm done. I've done everything I need to do to get that equation into slope-intercept form. All right, we're going to try another one. Why don't you pause the video and give this one a shot before I show you how to do it. So we're going to use the problem 4x minus 10y equals -50. So I'm going to circle my variable y with a number in front of it, which is -10. Opposite of a positive 4x is a negative 4x. So negative and subtraction are the same, so I'm going to subtract 4x from each side. 4x minus itself is 0, and I'm left with -10 times y equals my -4x and my -50. Okay, so my last step is to divide each side by the number in front of y, which is negative 10. So I'm going to divide everything by negative 10. Anything divided by itself is 1, so I'm left with y equals. My negatives cancel. This leaves positive 4 over 10x. Again, for the second one, my negatives cancel, so this leaves a positive 50 over 10. Now, my last step is to simplify. So I have y equals 4 over 10 simplifies to 2 over 5x. And the reason for that is because my 4 and 10 are both even numbers, so I can divide my 4 and my 10 by 2. Plus 50 divided by 10 is 5. And you can even type that in your calculator to check to make sure that you get a whole number from that. 50 divided by 10 is 5. So my answer is in slope-intercept form, y equals 2 over 5x plus 15. All right, the last problem we're going to do today is one more where we convert from standard form to slope-intercept form. And remember that with standard form, your x and your y are on the left side of your equal sign. And slope-intercept form, you have just a y on the left side of your equal sign. So my first step, I draw a line, circle my number and my variable, that is y. Opposite of positive x is a negative 15x. So I had a positive 15x, so opposite of positive 15x is negative. So I'm going to subtract 15x from each side. Remember, negative and subtraction are the same. 15 minus 15 is 0. So I'm left with negative 9 times y equals negative 15x, and then my positive 17, which I write as a plus 17. My last step is to divide everything by my number in front of y. So I'm going to divide everything by negative 9. Okay, now my very last finishing touch is to see if there's anything I can simplify. So anything divided by itself is 1, so I'm left with positive y on the left. That's what I want. My negatives cancel, so I'm left with 15 over 9x. And then I have one negative on this fraction. So that negative goes with the whole fraction. So I'll write that as minus, which represents my negative, 17 over 9. Now, my last step is to check to see if I can simplify any of these improper fractions. And the only fraction I can simplify is 15 over 9, because I can divide 15 by 3 and 9 also by 3. So I'm going to divide the top and bottom, the numerator and denominator, by 3 to simplify. Now remember that when you have an improper fraction, you do not write that as a mixed number. Just leave it as long as it's fully simplified. So my final answer is y equals 15 divided by 3 is 5. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So 5 over 3x. Don't forget your x. Minus 17 over 9. Okay, well, thank you for listening. Again, I need the picture of your 4 examples that we worked out, and please hold on to these because tomorrow you're going to do an assignment based off of this video that you can go back to and look at your notes to refresh your memory. So again, thanks for watching. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.